In 1965, a black household threw almost nothing away. And it wasn't because we were poor. Number 1 on this list wasn't in the kitchen or the closet. It lived inside a Bible. It's the reason the other 24 got saved at all. And it was the one thing in that house you could never buy back. Number 5 got passed from mother to daughter and never once touched soap. Number 11 stayed in that house long after nobody in the family could wear it. We went through church cookbooks, catalogs from the 60s, and more than 200 first-hand accounts from folks who grew up in those houses. Almost none of these 25 things get saved anymore. They left one at a time, and nobody said goodbye. We've been told our whole lives that we saved because we had nothing. But that wasn't scarcity. That was a system. And everybody online now preaching about zero waste is 60 years late to what our mothers had figured out, sitting on top of the stove. Number 25, the blue jar. Saturday afternoon, a girl on the floor, between her mother's knees, the radio on, and the smell of bergamot filling the kitchen before anybody touched a strand of hair. Blue Magic came out of Memphis in 1968. Royal Crown smelled like lavender. Dixie Peach smelled like jasmine. And Dax came in black. Most of us remember that smell long before the name. 45 minutes. The rat tail comb parting sections. Greased fingers working the scalp. Grown women talking right over that child's head. But the 70s brought pride in natural hair. No chemicals, no grease. Folks say that took the bottom out of Royal Crown and Dixie Peach. So the jar went to the back of the cabinet. Now half the internet will explain that oil seals moisture into the hair. Our mothers didn't have a word for that. They called it Saturday. If you go back to it, water first from a spray bottle, grease after, never the other way around. But grease alone didn't finish Saturday. Something else was heating on the stove. Number 24, the comb in the flame, straight over the fire. You tested it on a paper towel. If it scorched, you waited. And then that sound. Folks say it sizzled, just like bacon. Nothing on God's earth made a child sit that still. And every one of us remembers the burn on the ear. Who did your hair on Saturdays? Tell us below your age and where you're from. But there was another jar on that dresser, and it had nothing to do with hair. Number 23, the other blue jar, 13 ounces, screw top. And one sentence said, in every house on the block, look at your elbows. Ashy wasn't a feeling. Ashy was something people could see. Knees, elbows, your face before the cold. Feet with socks pulled over it before bed. Shoes to bring the shine back. Dermatologists still recommend it to seal moisture in. It never stopped being right. $4 a jar, and it still does every one of those jobs. But there was one more bottle on that dresser, and that one never got opened. Number 22, the bottles nobody ever opened. Avon on the tray. Imari, Haiku, Timeless, pearls and lace. Sitting on a lace doily, empty, and still there, because the bottle was never the perfume. The bottle was whoever gave it to you, but the Avon lady stopped knocking on doors, and nothing ever came in to replace her. If your mother's bottle is still sitting on a shelf somewhere, that isn't clutter. Leave it where it is. That was the dresser Monday through Saturday. Sunday called for something that didn't fit on any tray. Number 21, the round box in the back of the closet, top shelf of the closet, or under the bed. Round, stiff cardboard, sometimes covered in fabric. And inside, there wasn't a hat. There was a crown. That's what they called them. Crowns. A woman might have 10, 15, more. And among the sisters of that church, there was no competition. There was admiration. But this part needs saying slow. Monday through Saturday, that woman cleaned houses that were not hers. Sunday morning, she put on the crown. and for a few hours, the world saw her exactly the way she saw herself. But the 1990s came. Churches loosened the dress code, and the generation behind didn't pick it up. So the boxes stayed closed. A lot of them still are, in a mother's closet, had inside, never touched. And now, museums put them behind glass. The Harrison Museum in Roanoke called their exhibit Extraordinary Crowns. It took 50 years to name what we already knew in 1965. If there's a box on top of your mother's closet, open it with her. Ask her where she wore it. Everything on that dresser had a brand name and a smell. On the other side of that house, there were things kept with no name at all. Number 20, the jars nailed to the ceiling. Gerber, clear glass, metal lid, that baby with the rosy cheeks on the label. But the jar wasn't the point. The LID was. You nailed the lid up under a basement joist, and the jar screwed on from underneath. Nails in one, screws in another, every size in its own jar. That was your daddy's territory. Nobody else put a hand on it. One screw through a lid, under any shelf in your garage. 10 minutes, and you never lose a washer again. At least you could see through that one. The next one, you couldn't. Number 19, the can that held anything but coffee. The blue Maxwell House can, the red Folgers can, and that plastic lid, always saved separately. Inside, there could be anything on this earth except coffee. Bacon grease, coins, garden seeds, buttons, church money, fishing bait. At your grandmother's house, you never knew until you opened it. But coffee moved into plastic tubs and foil bags, and a plastic tub won't hold a pound of nails. That can stay in one spot, though. The next thing multiplied on its own. Number 18, the bag full of bags. Under the sink, a bag full of bags. First they were paper, from the Piggly Wiggly or the Kroger. Then the 70s brought plastic, and it got out of hand. For small trash, for food to church, for Sunday shoes in a suitcase. But the bags got thin enough to tear on the way to the car, so they stopped being worth folding. One bag holding the rest under the sink. It never stopped being the right system, but that was hidden in a cabinet. The next thing was out in the open, in the strangest spot in the house. Number 17, the doorknob that kept growing. Rubber bands, one on top of another, until that knob was twice the size it started out. They came off the newspaper, off the mail, off a bunch of greens. Nobody decided to put them there. That's just where they went. But the newspaper stopped landing on the porch, so the knob went bare, and nobody noticed the day it happened. Go look at your kitchen right now. You won't find one. All of that was out in the open. The next thing was under a bed, and children were not allowed to open it. Number 16, the box children were not allowed to open, under the bed, or on the top shelf, where you couldn't reach it standing on a chair. And there weren't any shoes in it. There were loose photographs, no album, all mixed together. Letters, Christmas cards from people already gone, a lock of baby hair in an envelope, report cards, and somebody's portrait in uniform. An album cost money. The box came free with the shoes. Children didn't touch it. That box came out for a move, or when somebody died. Then it went on the bed, and the women of the family sat around it putting names to faces. But then the camera showed up in the phone, so now we have 10,000 pictures and not one box. If there's a box like that in your family, take the pictures out this week and write on the back who everybody is. While there's still somebody living, who knows? Because in that same house, there was another box that didn't hold what it said on the outside. And that one, children did open. One time. Number 15, The tin that broke every child's heart. Royal Dansk hit American stores in 1966, and inside of 2 Christmases, it was in every house on the block. Blue metal tin, press-on lid, that ridged paper holding the butter cookies in place. The cookies ran out. The tin never did. It went up in the cabinet, and what was inside was thread, needles stuck in a scrap of felt, a thimble, safety pins, and loose buttons that matched nothing. Every one of us opened that tin thinking there were cookies. Nobody fell for it twice. But that tin wasn't a tin. That tin was a skill. While the mother sewed the seam back up, the daughter sat there watching. That's how it got passed. But clothes got so cheap that fixing them stopped making sense. Sewing came out of the schools. So we quit, not because we got lazy, but because a new button started costing more time than a new shirt. Now young folks call it visible mending, when they stitch a colorful patch over a hole and put it online like they invented it. Our mothers were doing that before it had a name. 1 tin, thread, a needle, and a thimble. That's the whole kit, and it fits in a drawer. But before anything got thrown out, there was one more thing nobody does today. Number 14, the scissors that came out before the trash can. That shirt was finished, but it wasn't going in the trash hole. Scissors came first, button by button, cutting the thread from the back. The zipper too, if the zipper was still good. All of it went into a jar of its own, or a little bag down inside that blue tin. And when somebody lost a button on a Sunday morning, that house had 40 to pick from. But the buttons got cheaper than the thread holding them on. So the whole shirt started going in the can. 30 seconds with a pair of scissors before the next shirt goes out. That's all it ever took. Number 13, the scraps nobody could use. What was left over from a dress, the good part of a pair of pants nobody could wear, squares of cloth worth nothing by themselves. And out of that came a quilt in Gee's Bend, Alabama, a bend in the river where black families had lived since before the war. The women had been sewing quilts out of whatever they had for generations, not as a hobby. Those houses had wind coming through the walls, and the winters got cold. They sewed at night, after working all day, and taught each other. They named the patterns: housetop, log cabin, courthouse steps, which down there they called bricklayer. In 1966, those women organized into a cooperative, the Freedom Quilting Bee, and their quilts put the patchwork look into American homes. But polyester came in, central heat came in, and 2 months on a quilt stopped making sense. And here's the part to say slow. In 2002, 40 years later, the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston hung an exhibition of more than 60 of those quilts. From there, it went to the Whitney in New York. Art critics, catalogs, a line out the door. Nobody drove down to Alabama in 1965 to tell those women it was art. They were cold, and they handled it. The museum took 40 years to catch up. If your family has a handmade quilt, find out now who sewed it, and keep it out of the washing machine. But the cloth didn't always make it to the scrap bag. First, it had to go through 2 or 3 bodies. Number 12, the clothes that went through 3 children, oldest to youngest. And after that, on to the cousins. The hems got sewn deep on purpose, with extra fabric folded up inside. When a child shot up, you let the hem down and the pants grew with him. And then there was the good outfit. That one didn't come out on a weekday. That one was for Sunday. But a new shirt got cheaper than a good hem. So the clothes stopped traveling. Sew the hem deep. It still buys you a year on a growing child. But when the clothes finally ran out of children, they weren't finished. Number 11, the bag under the sink. When a t-shirt was done, no good to the little brother, no good to the cousin, it still had one job left. You cut it up, and it became a rag. T-shirts, torn sheets, towels that stopped drying, and nylon stockings, which had more uses than anything else in that house. And there was an order nobody wrote down, and everybody followed. The kitchen rag was not the floor rag, and the floor rag never went near your daddy's car. But paper towels got into American houses and changed the whole thing. Use it once and throw it away. Now they sell cloth rags in nice packaging with the word sustainable on the label. $12 a piece. It's a cut-up t-shirt. We had it free, under the sink. Cut up the next shirt instead of buying the pack. That house didn't let anything get away. But we still haven't walked into the room where saving was a science. Number 10, the can on the stove. An empty coffee can, a glass jar, or a ceramic keeper with a lid. If there was a little more money in that house, and always in the same spot, where your hand found it without looking. You fried the bacon in the morning, and that hot grease did not go down the drain. You strained it, and it went in the can. Everything came out of that can. A spoonful in the pot of greens, the skillet greased before the cornbread, potatoes, beans, the seasoning, and just about everything eaten in that house. A lot of folks remember it the same way. That wasn't trash. That was liquid gold. But the 80s came, and this country's dietary guidelines put a number on saturated fat. Doctors talked about cholesterol, and vegetable oil got sold as the modern thing. So the can came off the stove. And here we'll tell the truth instead of what sounds good. Bacon grease has about the same saturated fat as butter. If your doctor told you to watch it, that is still true today. But that's not what got judged. It was never the meal. It was the seasoning. A spoonful to carry a pot of vegetables that fed 6 people. And what replaced it wasn't a healthier kitchen. It was food out of a box, a bag, and a window. So use it the way it was always used. A spoonful for flavor, not a fat you cook in. That can told you what was in it. In the refrigerator, there was a tower of containers that did not. Number 9, the tube that lied to you. Blue bonnet, parquet, the plastic tub with its lid. The margarine ran out, and that tub changed jobs for the rest of its life. You opened the refrigerator on a Tuesday looking for margarine, and inside there were greens from Sunday, or rice, or beans, or macaroni. Nothing was written on the outside. Nobody labeled anything. You opened it, and you looked, and there wasn't one. There was a tower of them, stacked inside each other, in the top cabinet. But Tupperware came into American houses with the parties and the catalogs. Buying your containers turned into a sign you had arrived somewhere. Keeping the one that came free turned into a sign of the opposite. So a lot of folks quit. Not because it stopped working. Out of shame. Keep using them. Just put the food on a plate before it goes in the microwave. Those tubs were made to hold food cold, not to heat it. That tub lied about what was inside. The next thing had just stopped being what it used to be. Number 8, the glass that used to be a jar. The mayonnaise ran out. Duke's, Hellman's, blue plate. You washed the jar, and that was a glass. Iced tea in a mayonnaise jar, out on the porch, in August. And the Welch's jelly jars came with pictures printed on them, made for exactly that. You ate the jelly and kept the glass. Keep the next one. It's a better glass than most of what you'd pay for. But in that kitchen, They also washed something nobody on this earth washes today. Number 7. The foil they washed by hand, soaking in soapy water. A light scrub. Smooth it flat with your palm on the table. Fold it. Into the drawer, next to the new box. 2 uses. 3. Sometimes more. The same piece that covered the dish on Sunday wrapped the plate that went to church after. But the foil got thin enough to tear when you smoothed it out. So it started going in the trash after one dish. 2 uses out of every sheet cut your foil in half. That's the whole trick. And if they washed the foil, imagine what happened to something that came free with the bread. Number 6. The bread bag. And the clip you were wrong about. Wonder Bread, Sunbeam, Colonial, Merita. And here we ought to stop a second. Today, store-bought white bread is the thing nobody wants. Back then, it was something else. There are folks who remember begging their mother for a slice of light bread, the store bread, the one that wasn't cornbread and wasn't a biscuit. That was a treat. The bread ran out. You shook the bag, folded it, and put it away. And that bag went on to do half a dozen jobs. Lunch to work, a sandwich to school, leftovers into the freezer, and lining the inside of a child's boots the day it snowed. The closure got saved too, the twist tie, and that hard plastic clip a man named Floyd Paxton came up with back in the 50s. And there's a story about that clip. They say the color tells you what day the bread was baked. Some brands really do use a color code, but it's a system for the person stocking the shelf, not a clue for the customer. If your mother checked the color, she was looking at something real. Shake it out, fold it, keep it. Best freezer bag in the house, and it comes free. In that kitchen, they washed the aluminum foil. But there was one thing that never got washed. And anybody who came at it with soap caught the kind of talking to that got retold for years. Number 5. The skillet that never touched soap. In that kitchen, there was a skillet already old when your mother was born. Griswold, Wagner ware, cast iron, black inside and out. Heavy enough that a child needed both hands. And that skillet had one rule. 1, never soap. Because that black wasn't dirt. That was 20 years of fat cured onto the iron, layer over layer, until it turned into a non-stick surface no factory has ever matched. And every one of us knows somebody who washed it with soap one time. One time. That fussing still gets told at family gatherings. Fried chicken came out of that pan. Fish. And cornbread. Poured in screaming hot so the crust came out crisp. But the 60s brought non-stick. And it got sold as the future. Light, modern, washes in 2 seconds. No upkeep. So grandmother's skillet went down to the basement. And now, a Griswold from the 40s sells to collectors for hundreds of dollars. Our mothers had one on the stove, used it every day, and wouldn't have sold it for anything. Coarse salt and hot water. Then dry it on the fire until every bit of water is gone. That's the whole method. That skillet would cook anything. But what went in it was what nobody else wanted. Number 4. What was left of the hog. Ham hocks, neck bones, pig feet, fat back, oxtail. Those were the cuts left after somebody else took the good part. And here's where we say it plain. Nobody chose those cuts. Those were the ones we got. But what got done with them is another story. Because those cuts have collagen, and collagen needs hours. Low fire, lid on, all afternoon. The bone gives up everything it has. The meat falls off on its own, and you get a broth with more depth than any expensive cut cooked in 10 minutes. That is not poor people's cooking. That is technique. It's the same thing the French call braising, and it costs $40 in a restaurant. In the 60s, Oxtail ran under $1 a pound. They practically gave it away. Today it's $8 to $12, and at a lot of butcher counters, it costs more than steak. The cut didn't change. What changed was who wanted it. We spent 50 years hearing our food was second rate. Now it's on the menu, under a different name, with 2 more zeros on it. Neck bones are still cheap. 3 hours, low fire, lid on. And we still haven't talked about what was left in the bottom of the pot. Number 3, the water in the pot. You cooked the greens for hours with a ham hock down in there. And when the leaves came out, what was left in the bottom was a dark broth. That's pot liquor. And not one drop got thrown out. It got served in a cup. Cornbread got dunked down into it. And in a lot of houses, there was a quiet order about who got the bottom of the pot. Now we know why it worked. When vegetables cook that long, a good part of their vitamins go into the water. Vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, iron. Our grandmothers didn't throw the broth out because the broth was the vegetable. And this isn't kitchen folklore. It's on the record. In 1931, Governor Huey Long of Louisiana got into it with the Atlanta Constitution in an argument that ran almost a month. Over what? Over whether cornbread gets dunked in pot liquor or crumbled on top. It ran in newspapers all over the country. But canned greens came in, 20-minute cooking came in, and fewer pots got put on at home. So the broth started going down the drain. Don't pour it out. That cup is where the vitamins went. Who got the bottom of the pot at your house? Tell us below. But the pot wasn't the last thing that got saved in that kitchen. Number 2, the bread that changed plates. In that house, bread didn't go stale. It changed plates. Monday's bread was Wednesday's bread pudding. Milk, eggs, sugar, cinnamon, into the oven. The most loved dessert in the South got born out of not throwing away dry bread. The crumbs breaded the fish. And yesterday's cornbread, crumbled up, was the base of the Thanksgiving dressing. The real thing, baked on its own, and not inside the bird. Which is why down south, it isn't called stuffing. But there's one picture that needs telling slow. An older man, late at night. Everybody else asleep. A tall glass. Yesterday's cornbread crumbled down into it. Buttermilk poured to the top. And a spoon. That was the dish that never made it into a cookbook and never got served to company. If you watched your father or your grandfather do that, you're already smiling. And then, bread stopped going stale. Preservatives keep it soft right up until it goes bad outright. When bread doesn't age, there's nothing to rescue. You throw it out. An American family of 4 now throws out around $1,500 of food a year. In that house, that was half a year of groceries. Stale bread, milk, eggs, sugar. That's bread pudding. And that's the entire recipe. And now, we get to number 1. It wasn't in the kitchen. You couldn't eat it, sew with it, or clean anything with it. There was only one in the whole house. And when a storm came, or a move, it was the first thing somebody reached for. Number 1. And it wasn't a holy book. Well, it was. But that's not what made it the most valuable thing in that house. It sat on the living room table, or on top of the television. Big, with the covers worn soft. And you didn't open it without permission. Open it and here's the first thing you see. It isn't Genesis. It's a few printed pages at the front with blank lines on them. Births, marriages, deaths, and written in there by hand, the handwriting changing with the decade. The names of your family. But the weight in that book was what got kept between the pages. The marriage license, the funeral programs, all of them, going back 40 years. Obituaries cut out of the paper, a lock of hair in an envelope, the burial insurance policy, and at the bottom, folded twice, the deed to the land. Remember the shoebox from number 16? Same house, same instinct. Except this one could be carried into a courtroom. Now the question that explains all of it. Why there? Why not a drawer or a bank? Because for a good part of the last century, for a lot of black families in this country, there was no other record. The United States didn't have a national system for registering births until 1915. And not until 1933 was there a single year when all 48 states registered even 90% of live births. The southern states were among the last to come in, and most of the black population of this country was born right there. On top of that, half the babies in this country were born at home with a midwife, no hospital, and plenty of times, no paper. So if you were born in Mississippi in 1938 in your mother's bed, your birth could go on not existing as far as the state was concerned. It existed in one place, written by hand, on page 2 of that Bible. And here's what almost nobody knows. That held up in court. American courts have accepted family Bible records as proof of birth and of kinship when there was no official document, going back to military pension claims in the 1800s, and on into cases where the entry in a family Bible was admitted as evidence of a child's date of birth. That wasn't a sweet custom. That was the family's legal archive, and your grandmother knew it. Now, the other paper, the one folded at the bottom. In 1910, black families in this country owned between 16 and 19 million acres of farmland. Today, there's less than 3 million left. One of the main causes of that loss has a name: heirs property. The owner dies without a will. The land passes to all the children at once, in undivided shares, then to the grandchildren, and the list of owners grows with every generation. Any one of them, or anybody who buys out just one of them, can go to court and force the whole property to be sold. And those sales go through well under what the land is worth. In the 365 counties of the Black Belt alone, an estimated 1.6 million acres are locked up that way, worth $6.6 billion. And in the 17 states with the most black farmers, between 1920 and 1997, 90% of the land was lost. Here's what matters. In a courtroom, whoever has the paper has the land, the deed, the tax receipt, the will written down. The family that kept its papers kept its land. The family that didn't lost it. That's why they were inside the Bible, in the one place in that house where nothing ever got lost, and nobody put a hand in without permission. And now, you understand the other 24. The grease can, the margarine tub, the bag of rags under the sink. Every one of those got kept because someday it would be useful again. This one got kept for a different reason. Because if this one went missing, you went missing with it. And we weren't alone in this. When this country's insurance companies didn't want to insure black families, we started our own. North Carolina Mutual in 1898, Atlanta Life, Supreme Liberty Life, pennies a week, and an agent who came by the house to collect, and the policy folded up in that same book, so that when the day came, your people could bury you with dignity and without asking anybody for anything. Today, universities are digitizing black funeral programs by the thousands of pages because they carry what no other document carries: the maiden name, the church, the brothers and sisters, the town somebody was born in. There are people paying for DNA tests to put a family tree back together. And in a whole lot of houses, that tree has been written out by hand for 90 years on page 2, under a worn cover. So go find your family's papers this month. If there's land, find out whose name is on the deed and whether anybody ever wrote a will. That one afternoon is the whole reason your grandmother kept that book. Your family saved these things. Maybe not all 25, but somebody in your house had a can on the stove, a blue tin with no cookies in it, and a book with papers inside. And there's something we haven't said yet. Almost none of these habits started in the 60s. They came already made. They got learned 30 years earlier, in the Depression, by women who carried a whole family on what would look like nothing to us now. They taught it to our mothers, and our mothers taught it to us, without ever telling us where it came from. Those women had 20 ways to stretch $1 to Friday. Kitchen tricks, shopping tricks, house tricks that worked in 1935 and work exactly the same way today, with groceries costing what they cost. Those 20 are in the video coming.